Be warned. By continuing with reading this document, you agree to the strictures of absolute secrecy. You agree to speak of this to no other individual who is not also read into this and all related documents. To ascertain this, you will have the following call and response code. You will record no notes unless they are on a high gold secured server. You will in no way distribute the knowledge or anything related to the knowledge of the contents of this file. Call. It is only in the minds of mortals. Response. That darkness can truly thrive. Failure to adhere to these structures will result in immediate disciplinary action of at least conversion to servitorship. Eradicus Project Number 3, The Dark Heart. Imperial Report, Dark Heart and Gallivant Initiative. Author, Esteban Oran. Date, Haku 11 458 UG. Project Start, Fafnir 27 430 UG. Structure. The Dark Heart was originally composed of 24 core entities, named Alpha through Omega, each comprised of a singular nanite core. This core was composed of scientific, magical, and redacted materials and systems. The goal of this was to create a basis, designed to seek out and expand itself through matter replication. In short, each nanite is unique in that it uses magical formula derived from redacted theorems and materials to break down and reinvent any matter, antimatter, or energy it encounters in order to reassemble it to meet the needs of the core entity. While this basic idea is common with all self-replicating nanomachines, the exact methods and means used by the Dark Heart are uniquely efficient and capable, putting these nanites on a level far above any other observed to date. It also means that considerably smaller clusters of nanites are capable of creating far more complex effects than would normally be possible. This was necessary to install the entire artificial minds of the 24 core entities into extremely small clusters. Each cluster approximately 2 inches wide, 5 inches long, and in the shape of a shard of black glass. These cores were not programmed by traditional means. Instead, they were given a single set of instruction: protect the Empire from all threats, obey redacted in all things. In all other things, the entities were allowed to program themselves, so long as they did so with the goal of protecting the Empire. These were initially done in a laboratory of Imperial Secure Experiment Site 2, located on planet Hunway Prime, previously known as Vion, in the Gamma Quadrant. This planet was chosen due to its unusually high instance of redacted, as is the seat of the redacted before the Unification Wars. This was crucial in the creation of the base nanite design, designated Typhoon class. The other crucial element was of construction was the heavy use of cryogenics, as it was the only way to keep the nanites under control. The other reason this planet was chosen was the presence of hive factories of the Pike clan that produced cryogenic materials and technologies. The initial Typhoon-class nanites were limited in their ability to replicate perfectly, as a method of keeping them from growing grossly out of control, as the initial Typhoon nanites were considered to be perfectly made to their purpose, and an unintended gray goo scenario was to be avoided. Upon completion of the 24 primary entities, Typhoon A, it was determined that individual entities were far too fractious to be relied on to cooperate fully, and a 25th entity, Ouroboros, was created and given the designation as the Prince. While Ouroboros has no ability to invent or create, it was designed to be purely analytical and cooperative, acting as the tiebreaker and enforcer among the other nanites. These 25 entities were taken to the planet Elian, a rogue planet in the Gamma Quadrant. During the trip, it was detected that the entities gave off constant levels of entirely unique, non-ionizing radiation while not in use. This radiation is detectable by sophisticated modifications to most standard sensors. Deployment began on Ghidorah 30, 445 UG. The planet Elion was chosen as a starting point, as it was at one point a planet controlled by the Null Confederacy. After the Nulls were put down, the planet was left charred of all surface life, but otherwise intact and mineral rich. The lack of nearby inhabited star systems also made it ideal in terms of secrecy. It was, however, determined upon arrival that there were small pockets of rogue Nulls still living under the surface, the population being not more than 10,000 individuals. This population was deemed expendable, and the nanites were deployed immediately and without warning. The first to be deployed was Ouroboros, given a head start, as it were, to ensure that the material and physical space to have the processing power to maintain dominance over the other entities. It was deployed into the largest population center of the remaining Nulls in order to take advantage of already processed materials. The population center had an initial count of 5,500 individuals, all of which were entirely consumed by Ouroboros within 20 hours of release. All communication on the planet was cut off, and a ship attempting to flee was shot down and purposely crashed back onto the surface of the planet. Each of the remaining entities was allowed to choose their implantation site. Most chose the remaining population centers or areas of dense and desirable rare minerals, with one exception. The entity designated Epsilon, often referred to as the Archivist, chose to be implanted far from living beings as possible, resulting in a stunted growth cycle compared to other entities who chose far more advantageous places. However, due to the altered cycle, it is theorized that Epsilon would have turned out considerably differently than his siblings. Over time, almost all of the main entities began constructing smaller, less powerful nodes, which have been called scions. These act under their main entity's direction and help to process larger amounts of data and materials. It is unknown precisely how they are organized, specifically. Again, the only one to not enact this sort of structure was Epsilon. Attempts were made during the assimilation process to discover why Epsilon remained different from the others, but all probes were destroyed or denied when they attempted to take deeper scans of the planet. All told, it took 124 hours, date Cilia 5, 445 UG, for the surface to be completely covered, and another 305 hours to convert the entire planet, Cilia 12, 445 UG. Upon notifying that the conversion process had been completed, the Empress issued two commands. The first, the entities were not allowed to colonize any further planets, only bringing in smaller asteroids for repairs and maintenance. Ouroboros responded with an affirmative. The second command was simply, begin. At this time, the Dark Heart disappeared. Later analysis indicated it had just teleported the entire mass to the then unknown location. It was learned later that this location was just on the outer rim of the Alpha Quadrant. However, it remained unknown as to where the Dark Heart had gone at the time. But we could detect that it was present and active within the galaxy by tracking the unique radiation the 25 primary entities give off, later named Farchild radiation after the researcher who fully described it. Haku 12, 445 UG. Exactly 30 days after disappearing, reports from the Alpha Quadrant began coming in. Scattered reports of systems simply going dark. Investigation proved fruitless as any ship dispersed was lost. 5 days after the initial report, the Empress herself journeyed to investigate. This was Haku 17, 445 UG. She used her own magic to portal to an affected planet that was outside of communications for 17 minutes. When she returned, she was severely injured, visibly aged, and fell unconscious as soon as she stepped through her portal. The Empress was unconscious, seemingly comatose, for 16 days, during which time the Golden Veil Protocol was enacted. This was Haku 17 through Kotal 3, 445 UG. The Empress was subjected to every test and procedure her medical staff could imagine, all under the watchful eye of the custodians. In the end, it was determined the Empress had been infected by the Typhoon nanites. indicating she had come into direct contact with one or more of the core entities. All attempts to destroy or purge these nanites were limited in success, though nanites created by the Typhoon class, referred to as Typhoon B, did show vulnerability to sonic energy. In the end, some hitherto unknown aspect of the Empress's inborn magic or biology was able to reject the Typhoon nanites and all their progeny. The Empress awoke on her own, though deeply depleted. She had lost nearly all body fat, suffered significant damage to nearly every organ in her thoracic cavity, and had lost apparently half of her bone mass to nanite infection. The exact methods of how she survived are unknown. In the time the Empress was unconscious, according to the Golden Veil Protocol, the Remnant AI was activated and kept up appearances to maintain stability in the Empire. The Remnant AI announced that unknown phenomena was overtaking the Alpha Quadrant and immediately declared a full quarantine of the entire quadrant. The black hole relays were remotely shut down, and a military blockade began along the most known drift routes that were in and out of the Alpha Quadrant. Upon her awakening, the Empress affirmed the Remnant's AI's orders, then ordered that the Golden Veil Protocol continue until she was fully recovered. The protocol remained in effect for 22 days, from Quartal 3 to Quartal 25, 445 UG. Inquisitorial analysis indicated that there was a less than 0.01% chance that any information had been leaked during the process, which was an order of magnitude higher than the allowable chances. As such, a Black Inquisition performed by the Shadow Corps was put into effect in order to thoroughly scrub any instance of leaked information. Later reports indicated this was sufficient to maintain the veil. By the time the Empress was fully back in control of the Empire, Remnant AI had been stood down. We were able to get further reports from the Alpha Quadrant. The Dark Heart, as is now known, had taken 58% of the quadrant. Initial reports were unclear, but somehow the Dark Heart was filling space with a loose cloud of nanites, even between solar systems, using an entirely unknown system of delivery. The interstellar nanites were classified as Typhoon C and are designed entirely to intercept any traveling ship entering the ship's Hydra M collection system and destroying the ship from the inside. Reports from the planets taken are vague, as they come from hastily transmitted messages, and no official report survived to make it out of the system. It seems that the Dark Heart's method of planetary conquest was straightforward. The Dark Heart would infect an asteroid with Typhoon D's type nanites, and then through unknown means teleport the entire asteroid to an unstable orbit above the targeted planet. The rock would fall, breaking apart as it did. The debris would fall over hundreds of miles of usually the most populated sections of the planet, and the nanites would begin infecting the people. Reports indicated the infected would begin by being reduced to little more than puppets acting on a set of predetermined responses. Library of responses was impressively large, but was far from all-encompassing. But it was sufficient to keep subject functioning and acting to assist the invasion until they could be assimilated independent thinking individuals. Often called the Black Eyes stage, as the presence of Typhoon D would change the eyes of infected in this stage to be fully dark. There were scattered reports of infections progressing further, but no detailed information is available. Shinron 9, 445 UG. It was at this time the Empress attempted to contact the Dark Heart via the extranet. She sent a single word, stop, before communication network of the Alpha Quadrant collapsed. No further messages were able to be sent. By this time, the longest reaching of the Typhoon C nanites had reached the borders of the Alpha Quadrant, but they progressed no further. It is assumed that the Dark Heart took the order to mean progress no further and restricted itself to the Alpha Quadrant. It is estimated that it had fully assimilated the entire quadrant and all 875 trillion residents who were unable to escape within 150 days of arrival, as it seemed to be functioning on an exponential growth scale. It is further estimated that it would have taken the Dark Heart between 6 months and a year to assimilate the entire galaxy. The Alpha Quadrant was declared lost on Fafnir 30, 445 UG. The Empress began the Gallivan Initiative on Cadmus 2, 445 UG, a set of ships and crew designed and trained to be most effectively deal with the now rogue Darkheart. She also moved up timetables on other Eradicus projects and doubled the tithe. The Gallivan Initiative was to be rolled out in 2 phases. The first phase using small, fast scouting ships, the second involving more heavily armed and resilient destroyers to accomplish specific missions in Project Apotheosis. These ships were specifically designed to counter Typhoon-class nanites, and as a consequence became almost impervious to nanite infiltration and most other forms of electronic and physical infiltration. Gallivants 1 through 5 were specially designed normal space engines, making them faster than any previously known ships, while also being invisible to all but the most sophisticated of scanners. Later Gallivants would be equipped with the Hyperdrift system, a modified method of drift travel that moves directly through the ethereal plane instead of skipping along the borders as normal drift does. This method, while extremely fast, was so loud that it was deemed acceptable as an emergency escape option only, the loudness being directly from the intense forms of radiation that ripping through the planar barriers caused. It is also theorized that this method of travel became widespread. It would begin to weaken and eventually destroy the barriers between planes. Gallivant 6 was created with the Shadow Drive, capable of in-system jumps through large enough areas of sufficient darkness by slipping into the shadow plane and taking advantage of relative geography to travel swiftly and undetectably between planets in system. This was intended to be a stealthy travel among infected systems in the Alpha Quadrant and observe or ambush as was needed. This was completed before the Gallivant project was scrapped. Gallivant 7 was designed to have the Gravity Spider, a method of limited FTL that operates using gravity fluctuations caused by massive celestial bodies, black holes, red giants, and neutron stars, for example, to travel through space normally not accessible via drift or the new hyperdrift. This method would be of limited use outside of a dense star field or celestial nursery, or its intended target, the galactic core. The design and prototypes were completed, but the Gallivant project was scrapped before it could be finalized and installed. The Gallivant crews were comprised of members of assorted enhanced soldier programs, with each ship to be crewed by members of the following projects: Ulfrednar and Achilles as combat specialists, Mimir as science and analysts, Icarus as pilots, and with members of the Samsara project culled from the Shadow Core as insurance against infiltration. The Samsara agents are given instructions to neutralize any member of the crew in case of infection, including themselves. As Samsara agents are coincidentally exceptionally resistant to infection themselves, it is expected that in the event of infection, they would be able to carry out their duties before engaging in self-termination. Saphir 11, 453 UG. The first wave of scout ships, Gallivant 1 through 5, were dispatched to the Alpha Quadrant. All communications were immediately lost, and the ships presumed lost. At the time, the Gallivant program was aborted, and all materials and personnel were reassigned to other Eradicus projects. 164 days on Haku 30, 453 UG, after deployment, there is a signal detected of the use of a hyperdrift. However, it was impossible to determine which ship caused this, and no further hyperdrift signals occurred. It is assumed a single ship attempted to enter hyperdrift and was lost either during or after that occurred. Gallivants 1 through 5 were declared lost. The Gallivant project has at this time been shelved indefinitely. Addendum 1. Added Falcor 19, 475 UG. Further observations of those infected with Typhoon D show that there are multiple vectors of transformation, but they tend to follow traditional undead forms: zombie, ghoul, devourers, etc. It is also shown the longer ones infected, the more powerful they become, with some shifting types over time, and others just becoming more powerful versions of their current form. It has also been demonstrated that while they have an independence of thought and action, the creations, now being called nanite undead or typhoons, are connected through a subconscious hive mind. The mindless varieties, like ghouls and morgs, being much less independent and require a locus, a singular being, usually sentient on its own, that acts as a master relay to the dark heart. And destruction of these loci will result in the dissolution of any typhoons under their control. However, it has been noted that certain creatures called V-type, which superficially appear to operate similar to vampires, are very difficult to actually kill. It seems that upon near destruction, some portion of them is teleported away and rebuilt with upgrades to make them more resistant to that which killed them before. As a whole, Typhoon infected do seem to be susceptible to sonic energy as a result of the crystalline components of their construction. However, it is unknown if any of the more advanced versions share this resistance. In fact, with very few exceptions, nothing more powerful than a Tier 3 Typhoon infected have been seen, though higher tier enemies seem inevitable. Typhoon D nanites are especially difficult to detect, requiring either specialized knowledge of what to look for or prohibitively sensitive equipment, as the only detectable energy given off by them, especially while dormant, is almost identical to background cosmic noise. It is only by looking for variations in hydro M atoms that they can be detected. Known tiers of Typhoon infected observed. Tier 0, fresh, O-type. Creatures newly infected who have not yet entered the Black Eyes phase still retain the basic characteristics of their biology and in some cases echoes of their lives and abilities gained while alive. It is assumed that some knowledge of the infected is transmitted to the Dark Heart itself. It is theorized that with a rapid enough intervention, a person of this tier could still be saved. To date, there has been no successful instances of this happening besides the infection of the Empress. Tier 1, Z and G type. Creatures infected to this degree that they have their biology more than 50% subsumed. While they may superficially resemble their former living self, they are now irrevocably overtaken. Normally, reaching this stage takes several hours, but it is observed that many Tier 2 Typhoons are capable of engaging in direct infection that speeds victims to this tier within seconds. These type tend to be straightforward physical attackers using minorly enhanced tooth and claw. Tier 2, M-type and T-type. Creatures who have been infected to this degree are vastly altered from their original form, given special attack abilities, enhancements to act as shock troops. The two observed varieties are vastly different from each other, both in form and intended function, with N-type seemingly designed to be able to quickly infect individuals and deal with small groups of armed resistance, where T-type are larger, heavily armored, and designed seemingly for open warfare, capable of shrugging off truly staggering amounts of damage through some sort of negation field. T-types, instead of infecting through bite or claw, are designed to release clouds of Typhoon D upon their destruction. It has also been observed that Typhoon of this tier are at least semi-sentient, capable of independent decision-making. They are also capable of being a locus, though if any Tier 3 Typhoon are available, those will likely take the role of locus, though Tier 2 may be capable of acting as redundant systems. Tier 3, V-type. Only one type has been reported of this tier, which are almost entirely identical to an uninfected and retain their own personality, mental abilities, memories, and abilities they had in life. V-type are considered to be primarily infiltrators and officers, directing others and able to pass cleanly through sophisticated scanners. In battle, they tend to stay to the back and let their other soldiers do the actual fighting, using a variety of magical abilities to disrupt the field. It is known that V-type have infiltrated the Empire, but as they have only been discovered after destruction, it is unknown to what extent they have done so. As of now, there is no known way to detect them by any sensor. These tiers seem to be almost always acting as locus for others, and there does seem to be a limit to the number of others they can reliably control, though the limit seems to vary from individual to individual. Type 4, unknown. There have been scattered, hastily transmitted reports of something more powerful, or perhaps multiple varieties of something more powerful. But to date, no force has survived engagement long enough to provide an accurate report, and none have survived. Ships. The Typhoon nanites can be formed into a ship colony, which allows for individuals to engage in drift travel. Only one pattern of ship has been seen, a medium-sized black insectal ship that dissolves into Typhoon S pattern nanites upon destruction. They also seem to be capable of altering their structure to shift damaged systems, repair damage extremely quickly, and deploy weapons seemingly out of any surface. To date, only 12 of these ships have been successfully destroyed in combat, while they have destroyed hundreds of Empire ships of a much larger size and with, by normal appearances, larger guns. To say they hit above their weight class is an understatement, and any engagement with these ships is to be considered extremely dangerous.